Hi, guys. This is Richard Sachs. This is Lost Arts Radio, and it's our Sunday show, and we try to bring on inspiring people and organizations that are doing things that are really good for you guys to know about. And we have a special group today that I will introduce to you, and I just want to preface it by saying that humanity, as all of you know, if you're regular listeners, humanity is under attack from a lot of different sources, and it's not by chance, it's not disconnected, it's all very highly organized, and we're trying to get it so people are more aware of what's going on, and then the next step would be aware of things that you can do that are positive to make it better, so we don't just spend the time listing the bad things and saying, well, that's it, see you next time, and just leave everybody depressed. You need to have both and be aware of the real situation that surrounds you and what's going on in your environment, and then what are the positive steps that we can take, because individuals and humanity as a whole has a lot more power and options for good things than a lot of people know about. So that's the purpose of this educational program. And then the private part you know about is that Planetary Healing Club. That is another story we'll get to at the end. So for right now, let me introduce our guest to you. First of all is Miste Karlfeldt, and I've been talking to her for a couple of years at least, maybe a little bit longer, and she's the founder of Health Freedom Idaho, which I became aware of through Representative Heather Scott, who's been on our show multiple times as an example of some representative in state legislature that has really good motivation, and that we're looking for a lot more of those all over the country and elsewhere in the world as well. And it was Heather who told me I should talk to Miste because of the great work that she was doing, educating people on not only the vaccine issue, but other things too that followed. And then Miste suggested if we're going to talk about some of the main issues, one of which is the 5G and electromagnetic pollution and EMF problems and Wi-Fi issues and things like that, that we should plan a series of shows, and this is the first one of those. So this one is going to be on the whole electromagnetic, Wi-Fi, 5G, smart meter, all HARP systems and all of the types of electromagnetic pollution that we're dealing with. We may get into some other things that connect to that, mainly since everything's connected. But then we'll focus on a different major topic on each of these shows in this series. So Miste brought in some great people to help. So we always have 10 times more to go over than we have time for, but it's going to add a lot of perspective and kind of stereo vision to bring in these other people. And Cathy Cooke is one who's a holistic nutritionist and a building biology environmental consultant who helps people find out what they can do both in their body and in the outside environment, in their home especially, that can be improved in ways that we're not normally told about, which is really important. So she's going to have a lot to contribute. And Christie Hodge, founder of, let me make sure I say this correctly, reactunite.org, and it's a name that stands for Rural Eagle, the town that she lives in, against cell towers. And the whole issue of cell towers is a really big one because they've been put all over the world and certainly all over the U.S. and have caused immense damage. They've even been put on top of schools and churches and all kinds of places where they could do the most damage. And, whether that's a coincidence, you might get into that later on. But there's no doubt that they are the sites of cancer clusters and all kinds of behavioral damage and other things that are noticed in children. So we're going to get into that in as much depth as we have time for. And of course that will give us the baseline to contrast the new type of cell towers, which are these little innocuous, harmless sounding units called small cells. And they're not quite as innocuous as we're supposed to believe. We'll have a lot to get into. And then Ryan McAnelly, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who's a certified EMF specialist. I got to meet him last night in some detail, and that's going to be fantastic to have his input because he gave up a whole other career just to help people harmonize the environment within their homes and offices and places like that. I asked him last night if he can do cars too, because cars have become dangerous environments, not just because you might crash, but because you're being radiated. Even if you turn your cell phone off in the car, there are other features, you might call them, I guess, built into the car to make sure you get radiated anyway. And that will take us perhaps into the other issue of what happens to you when you fly on an airplane now that has its own Wi-Fi for your convenience and, well-being on the plane. And that's spreading into more and more flights now. So we have a lot to talk about. And I think I'd like to start, since I haven't given anything like a full background on any of our guests. Let's start with Misty, because everybody's got connections to Health Freedom Idaho, and hear about how that started and where you came from before that even got you interested in this, Misty. And then we'll see how that connects to all of the rest of us.
Okay, great. Well, I started Health Freedom Idaho with a group of amazing women in late 2016, I think. It's been about a year and a half.
Right.
And in 2015, I had been sick for several years with an autoimmune disease. I think at that point it had been a couple of years. And I had gone to the Mayo Clinic hoping to find what I could do for this nerve pain that I had racking my body. And the Mayo Clinic wanted me to do 3 years of chemotherapy. I didn't really see how that was going to help my nerve pain, my body attacking itself. They said not to worry about the cause, which was my big question.
Right.
I was in my mid-late 30s. I was a single mom of 4. I was running my own business. I was exercising. What happened? What was the cause? And they said, well, don't get distracted by that. We're just going to manage the symptoms.
Yeah, causes are conspiracy theories anyway, so that got you back on the right track.
Right. So I said, well, how is chemotherapy going to bring me the life and vitality that I had? I just don't see how that's going to work. And they said, well, it's like we're going to reboot one area of your immune system. The rest of your immune system will be untouched, and we're just going to reboot the part that's like misfiring.
Right. It's great how they can do that so precisely with something like mustard gas poison and stuff like that.
It's going into my veins. I just wasn't sure. So anyway, I ended up going the natural route, and I'm really grateful that I did. But in that time, there was a naturopathic licensing here in Idaho that would have greatly affected the naturopath that was healing me. And at that same time, SB 277, which is a bill in California that requires children to be vaccinated to attend school, it removed the religious and philosophical exemptions, making only medical exemptions available to those kids. And I don't know, I just woke up. I just thought, what is happening to this world where I was learning about fluoride in the water and the geoengineering that was happening. And I was just learning about everything at once and feeling like if I don't do something, who's going to do something? Right. And I looked out, it didn't seem like I checked other states. Are there other health freedom groups? Is there anybody getting active? And the few that had existed, I think felt so defeated by SB 277, they kind of just stopped being active. Okay. So, and in all of that, I started learning with my nerve pain that I'm very sensitive to Wi-Fi or big energy plants. Just absolutely set my nerve pain on fire. So then that was another thing I needed to learn about.
So you're just observing, when you were closer to those things, you felt worse, and when you got away from them, it got better? Is that how you found out? Really,
I was on a couple of road trips with my husband, and I would literally just pass out from the pain before we even saw the big glowing whatever was happening, if they're energy plants or what they are in the middle of nowhere. And right. I would literally pass out from the pain, and my husband said we would get like equal distance away from it on the other side, and I would wake up. And we just started noticing a pattern that every time we would get close to these big energy fields. But then some people have these smart houses, with everything smart, and the coffee maker connects with your phone, and it talks to your lights, and it talks to your security. And I can't hardly go in. My pain is so high, I can't hardly stand it.
Okay. So that was the background of why you started Health Freedom Idaho, is to try to make those things better.
Try to make those
right.
things better, raise awareness, educate people so people can do something about it.
Okay. So Cathy, how did you get into all this stuff? Where did you come from before you were really even aware or interested, and what were the steps that happened up to now?
Yeah, so I was working in the nonprofit industry for about 20 years, but I had a lifetime of health issues myself. I was bit by a tick when I was 12 and, 30-something years ago, and I had really never been the same since. So I was constantly researching and trying to understand, biochemistry and what my symptoms were about, and trying to get a handle on my own health issues. So in 2013, I decided to go back to school for holistic nutrition. And I got my degree in holistic nutrition. I started to understand the steps I needed to take to heal myself. But after a few years, though I started to notice a lot of progress, there was still a few lingering issues I just couldn't get a handle on. And the more I researched, the more EMFs really started to come up. And so I remember one day it just hit me and I said, I just got to turn all this stuff off. So I unplugged my Wi-Fi, I put my phone in a drawer somewhere, and I didn't use any radio communications for a good couple weeks.
I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but again, what made you even think of trying that?
Right, just the research that kept coming up. So the most significant issue I was still dealing with was insomnia. I had pretty severe insomnia, and I could lay in bed all night and it was just like my world was buzzing, and there was like bright light behind my eyes, and I just felt like everything was just animated, and I just couldn't sleep. So I was digging really deep into the research to find out why I wasn't sleeping. And most of us probably know the story. I had to look at, I had to really go onto the fringe to figure out what was going on, because the standard medical literature is not going to have anything about this. It's going to tell you to drink chamomile tea and, you're going to sleep fine. And of course, that's not going to do anything.
Right.
So the deeper I researched, the more electromagnetic fields started to surface. And so that triggered me to kind of just turn everything off. And I, to be completely honest, I thought this was all woo-woo. I thought it was just some, I don't know, just weird person thing. So when I eliminated it, I noticed in about 3 days that this severe tinnitus I'd had for about a decade was totally gone. It just, and I didn't even make the correlation between tinnitus and my cell phone. But it was gone, and it's been gone ever since. And then, slowly over the next couple weeks, my sleep started to improve, and just all these peripheral symptoms started to get better. Less anxiety, less irritability, more energy, much deeper sleep. And it just kind of all fell into place for me. And so I realized that as a holistic practitioner, if I was going to help my clients with their overall health, I had to know this piece of it because it was so important and so impactful. Right. So in 2017, I began studying with the Institute for Building Biology and Ecology and became fully certified as a building biologist last year in 2018. Mm-hmm. So that's my story.
Okay. Wow. So it's almost like all of us have related paths, even though we go through different experiences. There's something that shakes you out of just accepting that everything is what they tell you. So Christie, what happened with you, and what happened with getting you to be interested in founding the organization that you did, and how did you get focused on cell towers? Where did that come from?
We could talk about that all day.
I know. And I really apologize to each one of you for not having hours for each one, because there's more than enough to fill that time. Maybe we'll be able to do more, but I just thought it would be kind of neat to have everybody together, at least for our first time.
Yeah.
So Christie.
For me, basically, you don't know what you don't know, right? So I'm carrying on through life, running my businesses, doing the mom and the wife thing and all of that. And in May of last year, my neighbor came over to me with a lovely piece of paper and said, "Did you get this in the mail?" And I'm like, "What is it?" She's like, "Well, Verizon, our property owners want to put a cell tower right here next to our house." And I thought, wow, this is a joke. First of all, we're on residential property. We're safe, right? Yeah. We had just moved in, saved up our whole lives, scraped up for the home for our family, just finished it, have this lovely view, and here we go. So my nightmare kind of began there. So I pretty much rounded up the troops around the neighborhood because this tower was literally going smack dab in the middle of residential estate properties. And got a hold of everybody, and we had a group. I made a logo. I came up with a name, a website. I had to do something. I can't just sit there and let that happen. And in the back of my mind, I understand big wireless telecom industries and their pull and their bullying and everything they have in regards to our life. So I was kind of felt like, oh, we're done. There's nothing I can do. But long story short, 10 months of my life sucked into learning everything I could possibly learn, because at the beginning, when you don't know anything other than a tower going up. So my first concern was, oh my gosh, this thing's going to hover over our homes. It's going to ruin my view. What are we doing? Well, then you start digging in and you're like, wait a second, these can make you sick, and you start learning and learning. Well, I couldn't rest at all. I spent 10 months awake fighting like mama bear for my home and for my neighborhood, and marching down to the city council, to the mayor, getting them involved, started putting the word out, and then came across Misty at Health Freedom. They reached out because they were like, hey, what are you doing and what's going, so we started that process and partnered up and just grew it into what it is. We ended up, after 10 months of in and out of the courts and appeals, we did win after much time and effort and money and the whole thing. We did win. It's not going in. So we're a giant slayer. I like to say we did what we needed to do so it can happen. But there's so much that I can no longer remain silent about. Just like Misty, you start looking into something and then your whole world opens up. And unfortunately, I'm thinking, why do people not know about cell phones and about your laptops and about all these why do we not know that? The average person doesn't know that. But at the end of the day, it really means, you don't know what you don't know, but even knowing, in this case, what you know, you're cutting off the hand that feeds you your entertainment, your socialization, all of these things. And people don't want to give that up unless there's a tower going in their backyard. So it's a fine line. It was something, but I just can't be quiet. And I'm teaming up with these wonderful men and women and all of our backgrounds. And I'm all about going in and marching into our local government leaders, our state leaders, county, and making changes to codes and ordinances, because it's coming. It's not going to end, especially here. This is a free-for-all, free land, and Idaho is trailing behind California, who's been in this for years and years, and now they're in a big mess. And I'm like, guys, we have to pull back the reins and look at what's going on, what other cities and states have gone through, and make some really good, responsible, respectful, and safe decisions with the growth of technology. So I'm in it.
Yeah, so, good.
Yeah.
Okay, and Ryan, you weren't involved in any of this stuff before. You had a totally different career. So what was that, and what happened?
Well, I can definitely commiserate with Misty. She's the first friend that my wife made friends with. We were a part of SB 277. We almost took a bus from Southern California to Northern California. But we went to everything in Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego County that we could to support all the findings that were happening. And we met Del Bigtree. We came alongside him. He's definitely fighting for our cause. He just doesn't understand everything. So as far as the EMF, I worked for the phone company for about 16 years, or in that communications industry for a long time. And after my third coworker died from, well, I had 2 from thyroid and 1 from brain cancer, I realized that there was a correlation there.
Yeah, because working for the phone companies and stuff wasn't very dangerous in the past. I mean, you might fall off a pole or something, but there were no cell towers.
Right.
It's changed now.
Yeah. The mortality rate in the 20s, 30s, and 40s was 50%. The mortality rate in the 90s and the early 2000s was a fraction of that. But what we saw was when we had 2, 3, and 4G cell towers, we had a placard placed that said, "Keep a safe 25-foot distance from this location."
Right.
So I thought I was done, fighting the good fight, but it's just been ramped up because they since took all those placards down when they said 5G was safe.
Right, and that 25 feet is a little bit inaccurate, right? It should be like 50 miles or something.
For the 2, 3, and 4G, yeah, we saw the frequencies raised a dramatic level from just 2G to 4G. Mm-hmm. And now they want to put 5G, and it's safe, but they're not doing any biological studies. So I went down this deep rabbit hole. And you just really can't climb out of it. Once you're in it, you're in it. And I just spent all my time educating people on it. And I know Cathy can attest to it, and I know Misty can, and I know definitely Christine can. Christie.
Yeah, I agree. So now you're helping people make things better in their own home environment, mostly, right? That's what you're doing.
Yeah, I research any product that somebody says that they have tried or used. I do have experience in relocating items, but the solutions that I've found, you don't have to shut them off, put them on airplane mode, or move them away. And we've tested them with blood microscopy testing, accugraph and avatar testing, as well as we do muscle testing as well. I specialize in muscle testing to see if the person is strong or weak based on if their body needs more or less remediation for their home.
Okay. All right. So I guess to use our time the best I can with everybody getting maximum input, which is really the main thing I want, is that the themes we can look at in the short time we've got, which is going to feel like it goes by in 5 minutes because this is really intensely involving stuff. Certainly, one of the themes would be what's going on in the state and the country, with this overall problem of all the different electronic threats, electromagnetic threats to people. Another would be what people can do to take care of themselves. And this would, as Cathy and all of us know, this has to do with both everything that you do, because in this realm, it's all cause and effect. It's like, in spite of what the doctors were saying that we were just talking about, everything is precisely caused by something and has all kinds of different specific effects. So everything we eat, everything we drink, exercise, sun exposure, sleep, magnetic fields that we live in, all kinds of stuff, every single thing has some effect, even if we don't feel it right away. And so my experience is that they call some people electrosensitive, but it's just that for various reasons they're aware of it. It doesn't mean nobody else is affected. And so that's another thing we can talk about. The other would be anything technical that people really need to understand that's not usually understood. For example, why would it matter that these little innocuous small cells would be placed 10 feet outside your bedroom window? They're so small. I mean, compared to a 300-foot cell tower, it's just nothing. So we can talk about those things. As far as how we go around, I can bring up issues. I think it's kind of not smooth if I just put out an issue and say, anybody who wants to talk can, because then everybody's talking over each other and stuff. So I think anybody can cut in, because it's just like what we would do if we were sitting around in the living room and no one was observing except for us. Okay, so relaxed and wide open. But I would start with Misty, I think, on the idea, what's the situation right now on this issue, and how does it connect to others in Idaho and all the states that people are listening from, and the fact that we have listeners in other countries around the world? What are the connections there? And then we'll just keep going around. We'll keep the responses kind of limited, because otherwise one question we can talk for an hour easily. So what would you say about that? We want to give people the most we can in a short time.
Yeah, and I will probably just defer to this dream team, really, because this particular topic is not something I've studied as intensely as these three. And I think you're going to find that this dream team really completes each other. I got to know each of them individually, and I just was like, oh my gosh, there is a group of people here that can really do something great for Idaho if we team up. Okay. So I introduced them, had coffee, and now we're getting this up and running so that we can actually do something great in Idaho.
It's great. Okay, so let's go back to the model of sitting around in the living room. Any of you three that wants to say something about the situation in Idaho and the country and the world right now, to set the context for individual stuff that we talk about. Following that, you're free to say whatever you want. Do you want me to call on people? Is that easier?
I'll take a shot at this. So
okay.
So my main concern right now as a building biologist, of course, is the rollout of 5G. I'm, when I go into a person's home and I do remediation, I'm always encouraging, okay, let's hardwire your computer. We don't need Wi-Fi. We can do internet because we have another option. You can still get a landline. Landlines work. So we don't have to use a cell phone. We can use a landline. And I help people just bring down their electromagnetic exposure so that our bodies can cope. And the concerning issue with the rollout of 5G is because 5G uses small cell antennas, like you mentioned, they have to be put it's density. It's about density. They have to be put very close together so that they can communicate with each other, which means that they're going to be put, on the light post outside of our bedroom window. And the problem there is that we no longer can get away from it. And that's, I mean, certainly there are people's homes that are very close to cell towers, like Christie's almost was, and they have issues in and of themselves. But for those of us that really want to be proactive and not be near this exposure, when 5G rolls out, we're going to no longer have an option to get away because it will be ubiquitous. It will be everywhere.
Yep.
Right. I think I totally agree with that. And I think to make the structure of this discussion easier, I think let's keep going in the order that we were going, and everybody gets a chance to say whatever they want. And then anyone who wants to cut in of you guys, that's something important that has to go in the middle of what somebody else is saying, that's fine. Okay. I don't mind that at all. This just hopefully makes it more relaxed. So Christie, what do you think, in addition to what was just said? What's your impression of how things are going locally and around the rest of the world with this issue?
Yeah, I do know that Idaho is a bit behind, but the sad thing about that is in the event with us, we were dealing with Horizon Tower. They are a tower company out of Southern California, and they have their sites set right now on about 8 locations in our valley area with where they want to put towers. So you've got these bigger companies from other states that have been saturated, and it's it rolls out in the big cities and then it eventually gets to us. And so I think Idaho now is on the cusps of, we really need to get going in our actions with our codes and ordinances. We're behind the times, so to speak. And so it's a free-for-all, and these telecom companies are being allowed to come in and we want one here, we want to do this and this, and Idaho's like, oh, okay. And the big thing is education and empowerment is so important on their level. We have to feed them this education. The bad thing is that they cannot base any decisions on health effects. As crazy as that sounds,
because it is crazy. That's why it sounds like that.
Well, when you were talking about, is it a coincidence? At the end of the day, it's not a coincidence that these are going on schools, government entities, and whatnot, because it's money. So at the end of the day, you're getting a paycheck if you have a tower at your church. The church is like, yay, money. People see it as that. Yeah. They're not seeing it as, yay, cancer, or yay. They have no idea. They have no idea. Right. So it's a bit frustrating.
One of the things you brought up that I want to clarify is that just because 5G is rolling out everywhere, apparently doesn't mean that they're going to stop expanding the big cell towers too. No. Right? Those are both happening.
Yep. So you have to look at, and Ryan he's going to know more than nitty gritty, but from what I have learned in my short amount of time is that a mast cell tower, it can be disguised as which they were going to do, was a selling tactic. Was, what do you mean? It's going to look like a pine tree.
Well, it's a tree that you don't even have to water. It's great.
But it's just funny because if you saw this land sitting here right next to me, there's not one tree on it. So all of a sudden you're going to have this huge, but it's insane. And so the thing is with that is it gets erected and it goes long distance, miles. So you're able to get what you need from that miles away. The problem is, when you live directly under it or within close proximity, is you actually get worse coverage, but you get all the EMF effects of it. Yeah. And studies show, from everything I've learned, that populations within a quarter mile of a cell tower have 3 to 4 times the amount of cancer rates. And when I read that, I went, oh, we're moving. And that's when literally we had to stand up in front of our county commissioners and say, listen, this thing goes up. You've got 5 of 7 homes directly around this that are leaving. We're leaving. We can't live here. But it's a scary thing. And with the small cells, as Cathy was explaining, those beam down and it's just targeted, and they only go so many 100 feet, and they have to, you know what I mean? Mass towers go and they spread way out. So it's fun stuff.
Right. So what do you want to add, Ryan, to that perspective?
I'm sorry, did I miss something? Did you say my name?
Well, I just want you to put something in there if you want to. It's just, I guess we're starting out kind of generalized. How do you see, you're going around inspecting homes and things like that. What's your overall feeling about where it's going and what the developments are on a wider scale for states and countries and that sort of thing?
Well, I'm new to the area, which is why I got teamed up with Miste. I'm still trying to figure out how the state of Idaho is operating. In the state of California, it's kind of a free-for-all. And in San Diego, they have rolled out 5G, and it is literally a block and a half between each tower. And it's either on a light post or it's on a telephone pole, which I thought was illegal to do, but somehow they
got it worked out.
Illegal now. Yeah. Because when they say a telephone pole, they're usually owned by the actual electrical company.
Right.
So if you can put a cell site on an electrical pole that's usually means you're paying a lot of money to have that installed. No, yeah.
Yep.
Christie's, she's doing the finger jingle. So
Yep.
Yeah.
What I'm noticing is that they're still not doing, and I know Cathy can attest to this, they're not doing any biological studies to see what this technology is doing to us. In a lot of other countries, they're shutting down the progression of the placement of these. So if we can get at least on a state level, if we can get people aware to maybe figure out where they should be placed, if at all, then I saw that.
Yeah.
Back. If we can get at least the placement of these designated, then we're winning. Because I honestly don't feel like we can stop the progression of this movement. I see that. So with that being said, they used to always be behind an industrial complex or behind, say, a grocery outlet.
The big towers, you mean, right?
Yeah. Now they want to just stick them, as Cathy and Christie said, they just want to stick them right in front of our house.
Right.
So what we have to do is start talking about the loss of monies that our property value is going to have. But I've also heard a couple of good complaints that people are using the Second Amendment for free speech to say, hey, I am still concerned about my safety, my health, even though the FCC and the FDA are saying it's completely safe. We still have the right to voice that.
Yes.
You mean the First Amendment, free speech, right?
Free speech, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question comes up, if there's a law passed that you have to do something suicidal or damaging to yourself, what does that mean? What if the law is upheld and they just won't listen to challenges to it? And this law says you have to destroy yourselves. That's
based on
a big question.
Based on the SB 277 movement, we still have the right to voice our concerns and our opinions.
At the moment, although that's now in the process of being made illegal. And I know in California it's been called for by, I think, Representative Schiff, who said it should be illegal to question vaccine safety.
And Senator Pan.
Oh, what? Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Senator Pan also.
Yeah, of course, Senator Pan. Yeah. Yeah, some people, some of these senators like that act like it's really questionable whether they're actually human. But
they're above the law.
Yeah.
And on that subject with vaccine safety, it's the same as this Wi-Fi stuff where they're saying, the science is settled.
Yeah, exactly. It's a new kind of science that stops.
Yeah, the science is settled. So now you can't, I think it was Clinton, right, Christie, that put that in where you couldn't say anything about the health effects?
Yeah, FCC. Yeah, well, and this is not, we're talking 1996.
1996.
This is what we're standing on today, that the FCC is allowed to get away with is we tested everything, and in 1996, everything looked good, so we're still good. No longer the case. And so, I am hopeful because the forums I'm in and the people that I am engaged with daily throughout this nation and seeing what's happening, questions are coming. And you've got Portland, I believe is the senator, and there's all these people that are now filing a lawsuit and coming together and saying, guess what? Until you can prove that these are safe, we're not putting these up in our cities. We're not putting this up. And it's happening, and I'm seeing more and more. And so there's things happening. And if you pay attention, clear down to watching TV. I don't know if you guys remember, about 5 months ago, we were inundated with Verizon commercials and towers and 5G. And if you start paying attention, somebody brought this to my attention last month and said, you're not seeing a lot of 5G commercials these days. And I was like, People are starting to question things and standing back, and our leaders, and it is about education. Yes, they cannot make a decision against a cell tower being placed somewhere on health itself. But we can educate them through the process, still stand on our laws, our codes, our ordinances, if they're strong. And we did that in our fight. We stood up and said, there are findings of facts and county codes that say you have to protect our property rights and enhance our property values. We brought in an appraiser. He did a report on our homes and the difference of having that cell tower here or not, brought that up. I mean, all of those things, they can make sound decisions on findings of facts and law. We have to bring that to their attention and make them realize we have property rights and property values and quality of life and enjoyment of our backyards, and all of that plays in, and they can make decisions in our favor on that. However, they can't sit behind a chair and say, oh, you know what, we're kind of questioning the health effects and we're going to say no to a tower, they'll get eaten alive. But they can learn. We can educate them in the process.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I also wonder about a document that almost no Americans have read, and that's their state constitution. And I'm wondering if there's anything in there that says that you don't have to go along with something that will knowingly damage or kill you. Seems like there should be something in there. There was another thing like that. One of our guests recently, we had Mark Steele on, who was talking about this in Europe and worldwide. He's challenging the town where he lives in North England right now. And if it works, it's a model that can be used here too. But Tom DeWeese was on about Agenda 21, seeing this as really part of the same overall issue. And he was saying that there's a civil rights section in the code, 1983 or something like that, and that he thinks that it might be usable for anything that takes away your civil rights. And the question is, what are your civil rights? This is just a legal possible avenue for making some headway on this. And if your civil rights include the ability to not be killed, then that might be a big deal for everybody to look into. But,
yep, you got to prove it. And I'm telling you what, there's some thick skulls out there, and it won't penetrate on any level. And it's, again, money. At the end, if you strip it down, it's... I don't even know. I can't even sleep anymore. Anybody else? I'm like, it's just...
You know, Richard, that made me think of the American Disabilities Act, because electrohypersensitivity is a known diagnosable condition. And, if we're going to put a small cell antenna outside someone's house with EHS, that would be against that law. Or against the act. That's one avenue that I've been pursuing, because, I don't know how that would hold up.
What does the act say, roughly?
Oh boy, I have it somewhere.
Or the parts that you're thinking of, even.
Yeah, let me grab it. I think I've got it.
Okay, sure.
But it's a person with electrical hypersensitivity has to be protected against excess electromagnetic fields.
Okay, they can't diagnose somebody with that.
Okay, so because it's a recognized illness or disability, actually, they're just calling it like a genetic tendency to be influenced.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So, American Academy of Environmental Medicine recommendations regarding electromagnetic and radio frequency exposure. Well, that's not actually let me read through this a little bit, and then I'll come back to it if I can get that.
While she's doing that, you asked about, what was going on in the world. Brussels and Israel, they've said no to 5G, which I think is interesting.
Right. Now, what laws are they under instead of the Telecommunications Act that governs the U.S.?
Well, I think that's a really good question, but we also have some zip codes in the U.S. that are saying no to 5G.
Yeah, so we need to know, what are they doing? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Connecticut and Maryland.
Maryland?
Maryland are not rolling out 5G, and they do not want any sort of cell tower or any sort of Wi-Fi near an elementary school or near a preschool.
Okay, now I've looked in detail at some of the ones that are holding it up, saying, and the headline says it stopped. But if you look at the detail, most of these are kind of bickering over exact location. And I'm wondering if there are any that are just stopping them. You know, like you can't put any in our town.
Only Brussels.
Brussels, maybe.
I'll have to look more into that. There's so much going on, you can barely keep up. But
I know. 24-hour days are not enough.
Yeah, a lot of people coming together. Like I said, a lot of leaders in government and statewide that are coming together in different cities as well. And they're like, nope, until you can prove it's safe, it's a lawsuit. So they filed a suit.
Yeah, so it'll kind of be a legal battle. You know, some on one side is people saying, well, regardless of what the law is, we shouldn't be required to commit suicide by putting these things up. And the other said, well, no, you're required to commit suicide. It says right here, you know, in the early 96 Act.
Well, at the end of the day, what right does the FCC have to tell a city government how they should manage their city? And what authority do they have to say that health doesn't matter too? Exactly.
And isn't the FDA and the CDC and these fraudulent, supposedly health agencies, aren't they in dereliction of duty for not even paying attention to the health issues? I don't know.
Somebody has paid them to not do those testing, though.
Yeah, exactly. Or if they've done it, not to admit it.
Well, and dollars in lobbying that's happening. Verizon, it was over $9 million that they spent lobbying. Like you're up against all these telecoms that are pouring in all this money, and in Washington, and it just trickles down. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think, it looks to me like that's why a lot of the so-called representatives are there, because it's a great way to make money and just, not really do anything. Taking bribes, I mean. So, Cathy, did you go over that stuff and find anything?
Yeah, it's just saying that electrosensitivity is recognized as a disability by the ADA.
Okay.
So therefore, I guess the interpretation of what happens with the placement of towers or proximity to EMF is probably up for debate. So I don't know exactly how that works, but if you have a diagnosable illness, and I guess the onus is on you to prove that device is then affecting you.
Yeah, I know. I went to there's a church close to where I live, really close, 300 feet away or so, and they have a big cell tower there. I guess they don't like cell towers looking like trees in the church parking lot, but it's disguised to look like a street light. So, and they said, well, I talked to whatever cell company it was, that telecommunications company that put it in, and they said, yeah, that's just because the city's zoning code says it has to look really nice, and that was the main issue. And I talked to the church management about it, and they didn't care at all. They said it was great, and they didn't want to discuss it. So
it's money.
I guess, it's probably $1,000 a month or something that they're making for it being there.
It's a lot. The property owners here behind me, it was going to be, a couple thousand to start with a month.
Yeah.
And that can be enticing to some people that don't consider anything else other than greed.
Right. Especially if it's certified safe by the FCC.
Well, yeah, but you also have to look at when they're putting them on schools. That money's going back in with the school, but it's going through our system, and so it's great money if you can put them on a school.
Right. But
then hold on, we can't put them on firefighter stations because they're exempt because it made them sick, but we can put them in schools.
Right. Yeah. Firefighters just have a separate gene that does that.
Well, they got sick. They all got sick.
I was going to touch on that earlier because that is a great point. If our tax dollars are going towards the firefighting department, And then they're claiming that they're having, brain fog, they're getting sick more frequently, and they can't do their job. It's safe to pull them down there, but let's go put them over at the school.
Yeah, exactly. Very strange.
It doesn't make any sense.
Right. So we had a guest on, the Mark Steele that I mentioned to you from the UK, and he was saying that the 5G systems, and other people have mentioned this too, have these giant power supplies that are able to power them up many times higher than they supposedly need. And there's a lot of speculation on what that is. He was saying that it's a weapon system, but even if that weren't the case, apparently they have to target or multiple targets for the device that they're going to, right? Do you know how that works, Ryan?
Yes, I do. If they have poor shielding or poor grounding for the sources that they're implementing, they basically can use any sort of Wi-Fi device to communicate with the locations that they're placing those. And a good source of looking this up and referencing it would be Barry Trower. He is called Dr. Barry Trower, but because of his specialty, he is British intelligence in making people sick using these frequencies. He doesn't like to be called a doctor anymore, so he just goes by Barry Trower.
Yeah.
He can definitely explain this in great detail if somebody wants to do the research, but he talks about a lot of the modems and a lot of the devices that we're placing around our homes, even on the outside. They're operating at 2.4 gigahertz. 2.4 gigahertz is what he was using in the 70s to make people sick. He was using it as a weapon.
Right.
So that's basically what they're going for when they place these devices around our homes, especially if they don't have good grounding source and if the wires are poorly shielded, which is what I'm finding. So if the wires have poor shielding, then the polarity can be wider.
Which wires are we talking about? The wires that go to a device, or which wires do you mean?
Any sort of wiring, whether it's a communication or electrical wire.
Okay.
If it doesn't have good shielding and good grounding source, then you're going to have a wider polarity reach.
Is the shielding the insulation, or is it a metal shielding inside the insulation that you're talking about?
Usually, if it's a communication wire, it's going to be some sort of mylar wrapping inside. If it's a electrical wiring, then it's going to be some sort of copper shielding inside of it.
Okay. All right. So basically, to know what's going on in any particular building, you have to check it specifically, I guess, for that.
There you go. I saw a head bob from Cathy.
Yeah. I mean, even if you've got a cell tower near you, it doesn't mean anything. Nothing means anything until you get your meters out and test. So you can
Okay.
Yeah.
So
you don't know the actual polarity reach. I call it the safe distance or the throw from the device until you're there and you actually test it.
What about regular computers that are not on Wi-Fi? They're hardwired, but there's a screen and all kinds of electronics in them. What kind of radiation are they putting out?
So you're going to have electric fields, magnetic fields, and microsurge electrical pollution, otherwise known as dirty electricity, and or radio frequency. So all four fields are damaging and have a lot of biological impact. So we need to consider all of those fields, not just the Wi-Fi. We need to consider the magnetic fields, electric fields.
Okay, so basically, with almost the entire population, and thanks to a lot of parents not realizing what's going on with this, a lot of 1- and 2-year-olds are now working on computers too. And even if they're hardwired, what are those people supposed to do to make it safer?
Well, Ryan has his method and I have mine, and I think they really complement each other. So when I'm doing this for somebody, you know, like right now I'm sitting in front of my computer, but it's about 2 feet away from me. I have an external keyboard that's wired, an external mouse that's wired, so I don't have my hands right over the chassis of the computer. Right. So distance, Christie, distance is key. If we're familiar with the inverse square law, just says, you know, the further distance we get, the less our exposure.
It basically means it goes down quicker than you would think.
Exactly.
If you double the distance, it goes down to a quarter, right? And
more than that, I think.
It's by the square. Yeah. So if the distance is twice as much, it's 4 times as low.
Yeah.
So,
I would chime in and say it depends on the device.
Yeah.
I've seen smart fridges that reach across the entire kitchen.
Okay, but within that reach, it's still at twice the distance. It's still a quarter as bad, right?
Correct.
Well, I guess it'd be like a microwave oven. I mean, if you want to sit and watch your food cook.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you go on an airplane, you're watching it cook from inside the oven.
But,
the microwave goes in the shed outside somewhere in the backyard.
I mean, we're talking, you know, when the microwave is on, it maxes out my meters almost all 4 of them.
Yeah.
So we need to get, our distance has to be much, much greater than if we're talking about an electric field from our computer, which is much lower to begin with, so we can really drop.
Yeah, in fact, there's not a huge amount of reason to have a microwave oven, right? I mean, the nutritional aspects are not great, and they were banned in Russia a long time ago, called radiation ovens, and it's just, the problem is that they're turning traveling vehicles into those now.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've taken any readings in airplanes, Ryan, but I'm curious about that.
I have.
It's insane.
So what?
I don't even do the walk-through chamber. You know, at the airport, I always take the pat down.
The little machine that you're supposed to go through. Yeah, to make sure, to see if you're a terrorist or not.
But see, guys, even like that right now, listening to you say that, I travel all the time, and I never thought about it. Again, you know, like when you come into this world of wireless,
you're not supposed to have to think about this kind of crazy stuff anyway.
The problem is people don't, and you have to. And to hear that now, when I go travel, I'll make sure to do that too. I'll add that to my list of 50 things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like you can't just live anymore because everything talks to itself, which means it's wireless. And I mean, it's from everywhere. So unless you live off the grid in a cave, I mean, good luck. Even that, you're getting it from space.
Yeah, and all the
I dug a bomb shelter in the backyard. All welcome to come up.
That would be good.
If you think about I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say all the good caves are mostly owned by the federal government now on the land that they've taken. But what were you going to say, Ryan?
I was just going to say, if you think about what that chamber is that you walk through at the airport, it's basically an X-ray. And they do a 360-degree X-ray of your person.
Yeah, but they're using millimeter waves now, aren't they? Which means that it's only supposed to really damage you down to a half an inch or so.
It's still low, but it's just not something that you want to go through regularly if you fly, like my father-in-law does, 3 times a week.
No, it's better to let them grope you, actually, at this point, right? It's not ideal.
Yeah.
That takes work. You know, it's somebody has to do something. That's what the problem is. Everybody's getting so lazy. Like the smart meters, like, oh, I don't want to walk up the driveway. I just want a smart meter it. Or I mean, everything is so. Yeah, I mean,
a couple of things have been big incentives to make people fall for this stuff, and cities and counties and states and everything. One is convenience for the individuals, and for the government entities, it's mostly bribes. And to sound better, they're called grants, right? And if you accept the grant and say, don't worry about this 1,000-page contract, nobody reads it anyway, just sign it, and then you're locked into Agenda 21, including all the radiation stuff and everything else. So cities have to learn to somehow not take the grants, and the counties too, because once they sign the contract, it's hard to get out of it.
And a lot of the cities and a lot of the counties, they're broke, so they're looking for those grants.
They need the money, and they're intentionally put in a situation where they do need the money, like individuals. So the individuals have to work constantly, and they don't have time to take care of their kids and stuff like that. And the cities, they don't. A lot of this goes back to something that seems totally unrelated, which is the whole system with the central banks. And if that's not understood, which it usually isn't by the environmentally concerned people, then it goes on siphoning off all the wealth of what people are generating, and they don't know why there's so much financial stress. They think it's because, well, maybe we need $30 an hour minimum wage or something, but that's not an answer, because if you did that, it just inflates the currency more. You have to find out where all the money's getting sucked off to, and most of it's going to the so-called Federal Reserve. But you were also saying, Cathy, that you measured the inside of a plane, right, at some point.
Yeah.
I was curious what you did.
On planes. I mean, it's outrageous. You're in a metal box in the sky at 20,000 feet, so you have more radiation from the environment, and then everyone has their phones on, and everybody's using an iPad or whatever. I mean, I can't even get.
And that's happened in the last 10 years, right? Because before that, they said, turn off your phones, there's no Wi-Fi,
right,
and you can start talking again when you get out of the plane. Mm-hmm. It's nothing like that now.
The last maybe 2 or 3 years, I feel like Wi-Fi is a pretty new thing, and the ability to use your phone.
Right. Yeah. Which makes everyone support it.
I have a good picture I can send y'all. It's the last trip I did back. There was a big sign on the way down to the plane, and it said, "Wi-Fi now available, free." And it was
free is a big.
It's just on the wall, just walking to the airplane.
Yeah, exactly.
So and
most of the public supports that because of the convenience.
That's the problem. Again, we are completely fed. I mean, our cell phones, they're not a phone. We need to give up that. It's a personal entertainment device, right? I mean, I'm trying to think.
It's a mini computer now,
games. Right? It's nothing that we initially used it for, and they've gotten people to the point where you're so dependent on them. And by golly, if we have to sit without something entertaining us and actually talk to the person next to us, what are we going to do? I mean, it's just insane, but that's...
No, so it's destroying the ability of people to communicate normally, I think. Right.
It's just where we're going.
It's like when the calculators first came out, before there were any computers, pretty soon people mostly didn't know how to do arithmetic anymore. Right. And they even
can't store a phone number in my brain now that I have a phone.
I still remember phone numbers from 50 years ago, before they had any of this stuff, and everybody, and they, to make it easier to remember, they put a word before the number. Actually, this is like 60 some years ago, but they had like Davenport 25037. That was my grandmother's number. And all of them were made that way because you were supposed to remember everything. It definitely has changed. Yeah. I mean, if you look at people's communication from the time of George Washington, who wrote letters, people used to write letters with things called pens and pencils and stuff, and they had paper, and they mailed them and then waited, a month to see if it got to the person. The level of language communication at that time, they were pretty smart compared to us. It was really amazing. It's not like we're taught in higher education that only people in the last 3 years began to get intelligent, so they don't want references from before that. And it's like all the old stuff's being wiped out. Another aspect of the whole electronic revolution is books on Kindle and ebook. You don't even have to burn them when they're not acceptable anymore. You just flip a switch, right? And that's now starting with, they're banning movies and books on Amazon now, just recently. Thanks partly to the alert of Adam Schiff that some of this stuff should never be seen by anybody.
Yeah.
And as a mom, I have kids that are just leaving elementary and now into the middle school, and I question my girls, like, what are you using? I'm not in the classroom with them, so I'm not sure. Are you writing in a notebook now? How much are you guys on your little iPads and all of that now? The Ramzini Institute, when they did that big study on the rats in the cell towers, and the big one came out, that's very significant now. The doctor was making a statement. I was watching her at a conference, and she talked about kids just in a room at school. And if you have all of them, which this is normal, I saw this every day at my kids' school, you have 30 kids in their room, all with their laptop, testing on their little personal laptops and iPads. It's like they're sitting in a microwave. And again, if you don't know anything about radiation coming off of wireless devices, or your Apple Watch that you wear, or your new iPods, or all of these things, or putting your
like
cell phone on,
advanced science. It's all exciting.
You don't know what you don't know. And so I'm just like, it's awareness. It's just.
How old are your kids?
Oh, just turned 12, 13, and 18.
So it makes me wonder, what are they doing to the kids that are 5 or 4? Or preschool age.
Well, my kids are
how to use a tablet.
Your kids are in elementary school, Misty?
Yeah, and they all have devices.
Incredible.
They all have devices.
And because of the this is what keeps bringing me back to the total evil of the Federal Reserve System, is that because everybody's so financially stressed, nobody can be home all day with the kids because you couldn't afford it, even if you wanted to.
Well, that's what I was going to say about these little, personal devices. This is like my assistant, It tells me where to go. It has my calendar. If I get up in the morning and I couldn't look at my calendar, what am I supposed to do today?
Exactly. Yeah. How could you remember all that stuff? And the other thing is, who can read a map anymore?
Oh, I know. I used to live in San Diego, had a Thomas guide. It was this thick. It took lots of planning to where am I going? And now you don't even have to remember where you're going. You just turn this on.
Before Thomas, we had these big fold-out maps.
Yes. Yeah.
And they'd be like 3 feet by 3 feet, and you have to read both sides. But
Thomas Guide closed down, I think, 2 or 3 years ago.
What closed down?
Thomas Guide. The company that did the Thomas Guide, they're gone.
No demand anymore, right?
Oh, sad.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, and we have so much to talk to. You guys have to stay for another 12 hours. I hope you don't mind. but the other thing that goes along with the assistant in the car, it's always the lady, I think, for some reason. They don't have. Maybe if you really want some drill sergeant man telling you what to do, you could buy one of those. But it brings up the question of, what about the general assistants like Alexa and all these other women's names that are being put on these robot things that spy on you?
I was going to say, chiming in, speaking of Alexa, so when we were talking about 5G and all of that, it wasn't too long ago that I was completely taken back by the fact that it's kind of all a hoax and a game for us that don't know anything about all of these devices. I didn't realize, Alexa has solved many court cases lately. She can listen to what's going on and listen to you, and they have audio of murder scenes and things happening. And
it's always turned on.
She hears you all the time, people. So all these things we think are so great. And if you realize, my friend said this to me the other day, she's like, I was talking, and then within no time I'm on my phone and it's pulling up ads about what I was talking about. How does it know? But the thing is it's all a major privacy issue. These small cells, I did not know this, but they literally they have that X-ray or whatever vision it is that can see through the walls and watch a person in their home and everything. And people think, oh, this is so great, I have great technology, but anybody can watch you at any time and know where you're at in your home.
Right. And what are some of the other ones besides Alexa? I think that's the Amazon one, right?
Yes. Echo and all of those.
Yeah. So they're Imperial probe droids, and you're inviting them into your house, basically, right?
Yeah, your home security system is also watching and recording you.
Yeah, aren't there names on some of those too? What are those called?
I know that Nest is coming out with a bunch of stuff.
Nest is one, yeah.
And they have the thermostat thing that you can set wirelessly, from your phone.
Right.
And they just came out saying that they had recording devices, and people were getting mad about it because they didn't buy it to have a recording device like they did with others. And and the manufacturer was like, "Oops, we actually put microphones in there. I don't."
Yeah. The workers forgot to tell us they did that project.
That's a manufacturing error.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And we knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
So, but
no disclosure. Yeah.
The targeted advertising is not the problem.
No.
That's the clue. Because ultimately what the people at the top levels want is to make sure there's no dissenting discussion or thought going on.
Have you all seen the movie Vaxxed by chance? Or not, it's not Vaxxed, sorry. Wife, what is that? What, Zapped?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't remember if I saw that one or not.
I thought it was interesting. You should see it because they said that even the testing on the phone that they say, oh, no, it's totally safe, it wasn't done up to the ear. It was done
I saw that, right.
out here.
It was a few millimeters away.
Well, why would they want to test it against your head if that would show it wasn't good to use?
Right.
It wouldn't make any sense.
But when they say, oh, no, it's totally safe, they don't say it's safe out here.
Yeah, there's an asterisk next to the word safe, and you just don't see it. Right. Special definition.
If you don't read your manual, that's your fault.
Yeah, you know how many manuals we're supposed to read at this point?
Yeah.
It's the fine print. And it's just getting the word out. I've been on the whole bandwagon about everything. So all my friends and family and everybody knows they're going to hear something from me about something they're doing. I'm like, wait. And they're like, Christie, just don't even tell me.
Right, exactly.
But it's like the cell phones. I'm like, there's fine print on your cell phone or that laptop that you're sitting on your pregnant belly or all of these things. There's fine print that says don't put that on your persons. That means keep it away from. What are you talking about? I'm like, it's there, but you trust it.
And there's so many procedures and tests now that they do in hospitals, speaking of being pregnant, that are not only wireless but massively radioactive. Like the radiation that comes from MRIs and things like that people don't know about in general.
Yeah. And the 3D what's that called?
Ultrasound?
Images.
The ultrasound. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's painful when mom
would
show me
your baby before they come out. So that's fun, right?
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Here
I was hoping for a 3-armed child.
Yeah, it's your big chance. But I guess the only good thing about the extremely radioactive, like I guess it's a 4G ultrasound that's the most advanced right now, is that it's showed people who don't realize that the thing that's being gestated inside you is actually a person. It's a baby. And there are a lot of people who thought that wasn't true. It was like your fingernail or something. And there have been people that quit in, there's this big new movie that's coming out unplanned that's being banned everywhere. That was something we heard about long before that. There was a lady who quit from a really good job working in an abortion clinic because on the new 5G or 4G ultrasound, she watched the baby trying to fight off the weapon of the person doing the abortion. And that kind of ended the fingernail argument, but it's being banned everywhere. You're not supposed to see that. But I know they need to develop ways of doing that without the radiation, because the baby, especially before birth, has no defense against that at all. But back for a minute to the school question. If a certain percentage, a small minority of mothers and fathers are going to be emotionally strong enough to listen to what you guys are saying and relate it to their kids, and so for them, if they suddenly let themselves realize the kids are being assaulted in school, and that's aside from this junk that they're being taught, what do?
Well, I called Ryan.
Okay.
Because my kids go to a little private school. There's not a lot of kids in there, but even still, if you've got 15 little devices going, and then also the teachers have their devices going in this room,
Right. Right.
That they're cooking all day. And it's no wonder that these kids can't focus, that they say they have ADD or they have emotional issues, they're melting down, these issues because they have all this stress on their little brains, their little growing brains, they're just cooking them.
Yeah.
And so, I called Ryan, and he's helping me out at that school. And, does the leadership at the school, do they really believe what I'm saying or really care? No, they don't, but they know it's important to me. And because we're making it happen for them, they're not going to stop it. And they're like, oh, thanks, Misty. Thanks for taking care of that. And I'm like, I know you have no idea what it is or what I'm doing, but thank you for letting me.
So what can you accomplish in a private school setting like that where they don't fully understand what you're talking about?
Well, I'll let you answer that, Ryan. I mean, they did it out of respect for me knowing what I do and me saying that this is an issue, and I think you'll see the kids behave better, and then I connected it with Ryan.
Okay, so you want to talk about it,
I spent
Ryan?
quite a bit of time educating people on what EMFs are doing to us on a cellular level, and then I spend a little bit more time talking about what the solutions that I use are counteracting. So after I remediate the school, I always make sure that any administrator or any person that's involved, I make sure that they are there. They're listening to what I have to say. And if they have any questions, they can call me 24 hours a day.
Okay.
So I spend...
Like this.
Yep. So I do muscle testing. We've done thermography testing. We have done accugraph and avatar testing, which I already said. And we also did blood microscopy testing, which some people don't like because you can fudge that information. We've done all this testing. We've found that these solutions are counteracting the effects of EMFs if you cannot do what Cathy specializes in, which is relocating them.
Yeah, let's talk about the difference between devices, which you can go into describing a little bit too, between the devices that people put on their, remedial devices that people put on the electronic devices, and approaches like that, which are, as you said, you've tested them to be helpful, that versus not being in the field. What's the difference?
You cut out on that. I missed that part. Was that for you, Cathy?
Well, I'll start and then you'll finish up.
I didn't hear what he asked.
What's the difference between removing the fields and essentially harmonizing them?
Yeah, like doing the devices that you haven't explained yet, but you will, about that make the environment better versus being away from the whole thing. Go ahead, Cathy.
So as a building biologist, our first line of defense is always remove the field. So, it's like the analogy, if you step on a nail and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, well, let's just give you an aspirin. Well, why not remove the nail, right? So that's my approach. I want to remove the fields, especially because I don't have a way to test what some of the, like what Ryan uses, a harmonizer or some of these devices. That doesn't show me anything on my meters.
Well, you also don't know what it would show you in 5 years.
Well, right. Good point. So we don't know the long-term effects. I don't know what's happening on a cellular level unless we remove the fields completely. So that's what I help people do. But let's say you're in an airplane, you're in a school, you're in an office building, and you can't hardwire everything.
Right.
What do you do? And so
or you're in an apartment next to a smart meter that's not going to be removed or something.
Exactly. So there are situations where, you can shield, you can paint, you can get canopies, you can get cloth, you can do all of these things, but you can't do that in an airplane. So that's where I think Ryan's technology comes in, which you can talk about, Ryan.
Can I ask you about that paint, Cathy? Because it makes sense to me if it's like, it doesn't absorb the Wi-Fi, right? It kind of bounces it off. So if you were to paint your inside of your house and still have your devices, it's just sort of...
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely... that cancels out that remediation right there. And so that's when I'm working with a client who wants to paint, we have to take that very seriously, because are you going to have guests that come in and turn on their phone? Because then it's just going to bounce right back at you and magnify the situation.
You got your own microwave oven if you do that.
Right. And then you got to consider as well, how long are you going to live in this house? Because when you move, who are the new tenants going to be? Because you can't get rid of that paint unless you're going to take down the drywall. So the paint's there, it's there forever. So what happens when the next owners live there and they don't know about this? So, you know, there's a lot of considerations, and painting is one of the last remediation steps I take. You know, I like, in some houses, I've helped people to install like a fence on the outside that's quite high, and then we'll put some aluminum sheeting or like even window screen. Window screen's really effective. So you've just got like a big wooden fence, and then whatever's coming in from your neighbors or wherever is blocked from the aluminum screening. So some of those are a little bit preferable because that can be removed easily. It can be changed out. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but it gets technical and it gets very expensive.
You would still have to warn the next person who came into the house.
Exactly.
That all these barriers are great as long as nothing is inside them.
Right.
That's radiating, right?
Yep.
What about shungite, Cathy? I've heard people talking a lot about shungite, and I bought some things for my desk and whatever, but is that something that you're working with?
So shungite and tourmaline, those are two big ones. You know, it kind of falls under the same paradigm that it doesn't affect our meters. So, you know, we're strictly going from what does my meter say? I have no problem with people buying crystals like that because, one, they're beautiful, look really nice. They, you know, I'm a believer that they have some effect, but I can't test it, so I can't rely on that as the main option.
You know what would be really interesting if you could be looking at live cells under a microscope and then bring something like that into the environment without changing the slide on the microscope and see how the activity changes.
Ooh.
That's called live blood microscopy.
Okay, so that is done.
That's what I have. I personally don't do that, but that's what we have done with the solutions that I provide.
Okay, so in other words, you're looking at the living blood sample, and then you bring some harmonizing device in its proximity, and you've got radiation happening all the while.
Yep.
And you see what happens to the blood.
Basically, your blood, when it's in an EMF-rich environment, it kind of looks like when you have the flu, you get a process called Rouleau, and the red blood cells stack up.
They stack up, right.
You get an excess sugar in the cell, so the center of the cells become white.
Wow, that's interesting.
So when we have done the live blood microscopy testing, we have found that that process stops. So you do not look like you have the flu anymore.
You want to give us a brief idea of what kind of helpful device it is that stops that even without removing the Wi-Fi radiation?
It depends on what the device is and what the like Cathy knows, what the meter reading comes from the device. But there are devices for smart TVs. There are devices for cell phones. There are devices for Wi-Fi and router modems.
Do they work on all different principles, or are they tied together by a basic idea of how they operate?
There's a different device for each specific fixture that you have in your home or in your car.
Right, but I'm asking the principle that they operate on. Is that the same or completely different? Yeah, so what's right? So that's what I wanted to establish, because then you could just explain that principle. What are these devices doing that people can buy?
They are basically creating a field kind of like a way a magnet would, the way your body is responding or absorbing what EMFs are doing to you on a cellular level.
So it makes it so your body doesn't absorb it after that, you mean?
Pardon?
They make it so that your body doesn't absorb the effects of the EMF field?
Correct. So basically, when you're in an EMF-rich environment, it's causing a voltage-gated calcium cell wall to open.
Okay.
Basically, the EMF is shaking your cell wall open, and it's causing what we call free radical damage to you on a cellular level.
Okay.
What all the devices are doing is stopping that process.
So when you walk into a coffee house to meet your friend and sit down there with the free Wi-Fi, that's what it's trying to do to your cells while you're sitting at the table, right?
Exactly.
And so what do these devices look like? I mean, just a rough idea. What are we talking about? Is it like a pendant that you wear around your neck, or what kind of thing is it?
I have pendants. I have cards that look kind of like a credit card that would just go in a pocket.
Uh-huh.
And then if they go on the house, they look kind of like an electrical junction box. And then I have devices that just plug into an outlet if you're super hypersensitive. I don't know if that's a term, super hypersensitive.
It works.
But yeah, and then I have devices that go on Wi-Fi units. They look kind of like a clip that would just go on like something that looks like that would go on a chip bag.
Yes.
But they go on the actual power cord. And then I have, as Miste showed earlier, I have the cell chips, which most people test very strong when I do muscle testing or when we've done blood microscopy. Pretty much.
And the idea is that these devices, in their own way, create a field, a permanent field like a permanent magnet would, and that field doesn't affect the EMF field or radiation with it. It doesn't affect that, but it affects how the living organism responds to it. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. And since there are lots and lots of these on the market right now, do you have any idea how many of them actually help and how many are just, fakes?
I do this science study behind everything that somebody has told me that they have used or they have. Mm-hmm. And what I'm finding is they either block EMFs or they lower the frequency, which both of those are good, but I deal with not having to turn the device off or not having to block the EMFs, if that makes sense.
So the ones that the ones that block it, the one that would block it, if you took a meter inside that field, no EMFs would be penetrating it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like the Safe Shield. A lot of people use Safe Shield on their cell phones. Those are great, but the second you open the phone, the radiation comes straight out up against your head if you're using it.
So why is it great?
Safe Shield's a popular brand that I find people using.
What's good about it?
If you carry your cell phone in your person, it's not emitting any radiation. It's basically just encasing the unit and nothing is coming out of it.
Oh, okay.
But the second you open it...
It's a metal cage that goes around the phone.
Yeah, like a Faraday cage for your cell phone.
Okay.
But the second you open it to use it, there's only one direction for it to go, right up against your head.
Right, exactly. And women are typically carrying these things in their bras with no shield in a gym, for example.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that, yes.
What do you want to say?
If you look at the statistics, so I was in a forum and we were talking about the environment the last, let's just even say 10 years or less. What has really changed? We were looking at the rates of cancer and diseases, especially in children, young adults, now, today, versus the last 10 years, and how it's just increasing dramatically. And what's changed? Well, our food, actually we're getting a little bit better about food and processing and how, people are more aware of some of those things. And we're looking at all these avenues, but at the end of the day, technology is really the pinpoint that we were deciding on, where it was a huge factor in the increase. And we were talking about the tumors, whether they're benign or whatnot, and the growths. where they're at on people's bodies, the types of tumors, and the women's breast tumors from cell phones, the studies sticking them in your sports bra. I have two friends who did that avidly. Guess what? They had breast cancer. I mean, and you don't realize that at the time. And then they were talking about glands, the swelling of our glands, the issues with tumors in the head to whatever side you're using. For men, sperm counts, testicular, prostate cancers, wherever your phone is, and the amount of even young businessmen towards like New York, big cities that were just falling down and having heart attacks. Well, nobody does autopsies, right, anymore. And they were just talking about all these things from a medical perspective, and that they're carrying in their business.
Shirt pocket, yeah.
Yes. And I mean, these are just huge things that are just increasing, and nobody's either they're putting two and two together, but again, at the end of the day, you're cutting off the hand that feeds you, right? So it's kind of that whole, I don't know.
And you don't notice anything immediate, so it can't be a problem, right?
And there's a very strong addictive quality to these things. So people know that smoking is not good for you, but people still smoke.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that our technology is even more addictive than a cigarette is for many, many different reasons. So people are willing to accept the risk while still using their devices.
Right. It's like immediacy. You're not falling over right this minute.
Exactly.
And if you are, you don't have to worry about it anyway. But if your kid is in school, even if you had a device that made the radiation not hurt your body, the issue that you just brought up, Cathy, is still there. Yep. Screen addiction, and the kid is being raised to live in virtual reality.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, what happened to going outside and playing outside in the dirt and getting sunshine and fresh air and being creative and using your imagination? And we don't do that anymore.
We have VR now. We can just go somewhere and put it on our heads and sit there.
And I would argue that none of us are happier for that.
Yeah. In fact, I read somewhere there's a huge increase in depression among people that use the phones constantly as computers,
Correlation between depression and anxiety and your screen time. Yeah.
Right.
Retention of information versus tactile. I mean, I'm in direct mail marketing for a living. That's what we do. And we push the whole dinosaur, postcards in the mail, and because it works. Because at the end of the day, when you look at people getting online to shop or emails, junk mail, the retention rates are staggering. I mean, it's very interesting. So we just weren't made for all of this inundation, I think, of technology, and it's just getting worse for sure.
So the momentum of it seems to be driven by a combination of convenience, and the world that you see in the screen doesn't have the imperfections of the so-called real world on the outside, right? So why would you like to see everything kind of drab and in gray and all these nasty things happening and everything hard to understand? But in your video game, it's all flashy, bright colors, and you can see all the good guys killing the bad guys, and everything's great. So how do you get people to want to break the addiction? And I'm really interested in ideas for that.
And I'm a huge component, for this topic and for just myself being a health practitioner. We have to get outside. I mean, I encourage everyone to do camping. I mean, Shinrin Yoku, if you've heard of that, the Japanese art of prescribing forest bathing. It's very important, and for so many reasons, from the negative ions, the critical importance of sunlight exposure, full spectrum sunlight on our mitochondria, on our mental health. I mean, we have to just get, and I encourage people, I challenge my clients to start with 10 minutes a day, and then we increase it as we go.
Right.
And just those 10 minutes will be like, wow, yeah, I noticed a big difference in my mental health, and so they're encouraged to do more.
It's incredible.
Make sure you're doing it away from a tower somewhere.
That would be good. At least climb down off of it.
Better. Oh, there's a tower right there.
The chemtrails, we get a day of sunshine and you see a blaze in the sky, you know, and then the next day it's covered and we're in that fishbowl again. It's challenging to get out and get sunshine.
It is. There's something like 23% less sun reaching the Earth now than before the geoengineering started, which of course doesn't exist. That's a conspiracy theory.
Well, Idaho Power has come out and said that they are participating in climate change. They do,
but they also still say it doesn't exist too. And I've talked to the National Weather Service about it just to get the real information, and they slowed down their talking so that I would understand and used short words and said it's ice crystals, and it's just because of the atmospheric conditions. So I think you're right, but the grounding is critical and the sunlight is critical, and those two polarities working through you. And what I found, Cathy, is that as your system gets cleaner with detox and gets built up again, you react completely differently to sunlight.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you can't take it very much. Mm-hmm. Eventually, it can't burn you. Unless you stay out for like days at a time. And
our ancestors,
your reaction of your eyes to bright light changes too.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother topic. But this idea of we have to slather ourselves in sunscreen. I mean, our Paleolithic ancestors were outside 24 hours a day, and they weren't dying of skin cancer. I mean, there's a whole dietary component, and all of this.
The activity and the grounding and all that stuff.
Right.
And you've got to get shoes off some of the time and touch the earth. And it's hard where everything's frozen, but if you touch a tree with your hand, you can ground that way too, since they're connected to the ground.
We just got to be sure that we're not grounding in a really high electrosmog environment.
Yeah, and in fact, I've heard some people say that grounding is no longer safe.
Yeah, it's in a lot of places it's not. But if you're on the beach, if you're high in the mountains. Which a lot of us don't have access to either, but I am careful with my choice of where to ground.
Yeah. In fact, the person that told me it wasn't safe was somebody who was testing the kind of thing that you're doing, Ryan. And they were saying that they tested the ground, and the ground wasn't ground anymore. It wasn't the Schumann resonance, which is, between 7 and 8 hertz. It was like it had changed from that to, 50 or something.
Really?
Yeah, completely polluted.
That's why I recommend marching off into the hills somewhere, into the mountains or near. Somewhere where you don't have cell service is usually the best place to do grounding.
Exactly.
We try to do it every weekend.
So what's going on with the program to put all these satellites up in space and make sure that everybody's got equal access to the best connectivity? Who knows about that?
As far as I know, it's going. I mean, I don't know that there's any resistance happening to that end. I mean, I think that it's on schedule. I don't know when launch date is, but everything it's full speed ahead.
I think one of Elon Musk's companies was going to be shooting a lot of those satellites up.
Yeah, fairly soon.
It's supposed to be starting this year, I think. Mm-hmm. And there's a group of scientists. I don't remember the name. Maybe you guys do. But they have a long petition, and it was about why they shouldn't do that.
Well, the pollution too. I think those satellites I was reading, there's obviously a lifespan on them, and it's pretty short. And after several years, maybe let's just say 5 years, then they just float around in space with the rest of. I mean, we just keep adding and adding. Again, you can't get away from it, and that's where I have such a hard time. Julie from Health Freedom Idaho had told me pretty much about the cell tower, and she said it's like being in a room with like 100 people smoking, and you're stuck in there. And that's how it is all the time. So I may choose to not do vaccines or do vaccines, or to smoke or not smoke. I choose those things, but with EMF and what they're doing, we don't even have a choice. We just are under it, and it's not okay.
Yeah, I think personally, if people want to kill themselves with smoking, that's definitely their right to do it, but not in an environment like in an airplane.
No.
Which is exactly what you're talking about. And if there was no way to confine the damage of EMF to a certain area that somebody's got in their own house and it goes anywhere outside, that doesn't seem like a normal aspect of freedom to me. You know, you're not free to invade somebody else's space. But these laws...
to cut out here in the next few minutes, and I'll let you guys go on with conversation. I guess just in wrapping up, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I would encourage just people listening that are kind of, you know, skeptical or not sure, to get out there and just start really reading and doing research. Environmental Health Trust. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that site. It is amazing. It was my mothership of things while I was going through my journey.
Is it all spelled out? Environmentalhealthtrust.com?
It's EHT.org. I have it here. It is ehtrust.org. And by far, they are a huge group, very concerned about the environmental effects. And the research and the people, the knowledge is astounding. It's just a good resource just to kind of start opening your eyes to things, because it can get very overwhelming very fast.
Yeah.
So,
and you want to take care of your own environment and pay attention to where your kids are all day.
Yes. So
be involved. Thanks for being here, Christie. It was great. And I hope you'll do more with us after this.
Take care.
Okay. We'll see you soon. So I think with what we want to come down to is there's probably three major categories in what plus more, but three major ones that I'm thinking of in what we've been talking about. Your own environment where you live. Everybody's interested in that, I think, or should be. The other one is what's happening where you're sending your kids. And the other one is what about your community, and what are the possibilities with that, your community being your town or your county and your state and the country and the world. I mean, those are all your community. So what are the things that can be done on those levels? How can we bring it down to what people need to remember from all this talk, what they can do?
Misty?
Well, Cathy's, starting something really great. Christie can definitely, I know she's left now, but she can speak to what she's done to help get the cell tower not in her backyard.
Right.
And one of the things that we want to do with Health Freedom Idaho is create kind of a database where people can say this is what they're doing in their communities, this is what's working or isn't working.
That would be great.
Yeah, to keep that from happening. So I think you'll see that growing. I mean, if obviously as we get going, it's just a little baby offshoot at this point of Health Freedom Idaho, but it's growing already. So many people want to get active. They just need to know what to do. And so I think with Cathy and Christie's help, we're going to build that website out and give here's what we're doing here. Try to emulate it. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, let's tweak it this way. Did this work? Because it's new. We're all just trying to figure out what the heck to do about this onslaught, that's happening against humanity.
What do you call that offshoot? What's the name of it? Does it have a name?
Idahoans for Safe Technology.
Idahoans for Safe Technology. So you'll see a website coming. Right now you can go to healthfreedomidaho.org, and we have a lot of information there, and it will connect to Idahoans for Safe Technology as well.
Okay. And when you say safe technology, you're focused on the EMF generating technology at the moment, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we're not saying we have to get rid of our technology, but we can use it in a safer way, and that's all of our responsibilities.
Are you aware of a group? Yeah. Are you aware of a group in California called Scientists for Wired Technology?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we had one of their Paul McGavin was on our show, and he was saying that they also have programs in some of the cities around the Bay Area, like Mill Valley and some other ones, where they haven't stopped it, but they're slowing down the spread of the 5G and the placement of the cell towers and things like that. And they're all focused on what you can do to stop more of a build out in your own community.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and that's partly what our group is focused on right now. We're meeting twice a month, and I'm in the middle of organizing a letter writing campaign. So we're going to write letters to our decision makers, county commissioners, the mayor, and some other key influencers.
Okay.
Just to start to get the word out that there are community members that do not want this upcoming technology.
Good.
So we're going from there. Yeah.
Did you guys record anywhere or write down or make a video or anything about what Christie's done that you were just referring to, Misty, to stop the cell tower placement where she lives, if people want to see that? Is there anything, or do we need to record her talking about it?
I think it would be great to record her talking about it. I know she has a lot of that information on reactunite.org, and we'll be putting that all together with our new website. So it'll be one source, for all of that information. But a video, interview with her would be great. Her story of how she went through it. And the interesting part is that, like she was saying, that was residential area where she lives, but right behind her property, kind of sandwiched in around her city, was county property. And so it was kind of interesting how the person who owned that county property, who came from California and owned that property, bought it under an LLC, and then was going to be renting it out.
I see.
Without Eagle, because Eagle has a little bit, where she lives, has a little bit different laws and rules for their city. But being county got him out of having to adhere to those rules.
I got it. Okay. Yeah, that would be interesting. Hopefully we can get her to do that. I think that this issue with the kids keeps coming back to my mind too. People are under so much financial pressure, they don't have time to have their kids at home even if they wanted to. But there's a situation where the kids are out not only being taught a lot of highly questionable stuff, but physically under assault. So we need ideas for what parents can actually do. And the only thing that's really come to my mind that could be eventually practical is, since not everybody has time to homeschool their kids by themselves, in the pioneer days of the early West, I think people were busy farming and that sort of thing. And they had a group of neighbors who had the same interests, and they kind of shared the homeschooling responsibilities. You guys think that's still worth pursuing in small communities?
I think that's a fantastic idea. And I mean, my thoughts on some of what we're doing is I want to get the PTAs involved, because if there is desire for change and awareness of change, then we can affect change on the school level. But that's probably not going to happen soon. So I think your idea of, it takes a village, right? So
a very specific village. It can't be all crazy people. I mean, it has to be, kind of the same consciousness.
Yeah. And I'm not a parent, so I shouldn't even be commenting on that. I think that's...
Well, no, but you've been a kid, and sure. you know a lot of people who are parents, and the kids that are being raised now are going to have a big impact on the quality of life on the planet in the future. So I think really everybody's involved.
Well, Idaho has really great homeschooling laws. I think that's one of the reasons so many people are moving to Idaho and away from, Ryan can speak to that,
right.
And away from other states where they're not liking, what the kids are being taught, not having control of certain things. In fact, I was just in Chicago, and parents in Chicago can't even enter the school building. You're locked out. My friend to bring her son lunch, and the staff said, "No, you can't come in." And my friend said, who's a police officer, by the way, said, "I want to take my son lunch. He's on the spectrum. He gets really upset when he doesn't have his lunch." Literally locked out. So not only training the parents that they are locked out, that we now own your kids all day long, but training the kids. Your parents are locked out. We own you all day long.
And it's not only about lunch. It's about what they're teaching them.
Oh, well, totally. Well, and absolute control.
Yeah.
From beginning to end, absolute control.
Right.
So a lot of people are moving to Idaho with, really great homeschooling laws. And there's a lot of those communities like you're talking about where they're teaming up and they're bringing their skill sets. And some Parents who are really history buffs are teaching history, and the ones that love science are doing science with the kids, and they're homeschool co-ops. They're everywhere here.
It's a big attraction for sure. I know in California, which is kind of leading the way in the other direction, they've had proposed laws, I don't know if they passed, that kids can give permission if they're 11 or 12 years old for all kinds of things to be done to them, including injected, things, and possibly abortions without telling the parents, and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
11 years old.
Yeah. And they're starting these big new programs now in libraries and community centers and schools about to make sure that all the kids are really unclear about what gender they are.
Right.
That's a big program now. And they're
starting that at 6 years old.
I've heard of some instances of 4. And then they're putting that together with proposed changes in laws, which are already in effect in parts of Canada and the UK and places, that if they talk privately with your single-digit age kid, and the kid is convinced that it would be great to change genders, and the parent tries to stop the surgery or the chemicals, the parent goes to jail, and CPS gets the kids. So I think what it seems like is a pattern that's getting more intense. And the pattern is, we're going to make a law that something absolutely ridiculous has to happen. And the law says you can't object. And, it needs a solution. I'm not saying I know what it is, but most people don't want to deal with that because it's so insane of a situation. You just want to think about something else. But that allows them to ratchet it up.
Have you heard about the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child?
Yes.
Because it's not just obviously the U.S. And the U.S. hasn't actually signed on to this, but what they're saying in the UN, rights of the child, what they would like to see is just what you're saying, where the school controls everything.
Right, exactly.
The nursing and the doctors would happen through the school. They would be mentally assessed through the school, physically assessed through the school. They would be mandated to go to school. And
this usually goes with home visits to the parents, too.
Oh, yeah.
To see if your environment at home is acceptable.
Oh, for sure. And it's all controlled from the school.
Yeah.
The parent doesn't have the right anymore to be the parent. It's all dispersed out through different organizations.
There's a doctrine in law called parens patriae that says the state is the parent, but you can kind of lease the kid for a while if you follow the rules.
Right. Right. Because people like to stop it. They have books out there saying that because of religion, parents aren't able to parent well. So that's why the state...
That's right. They might not be scientific enough.
Yeah, that's why the state should do it and not the parent.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting that it's moving in this direction. And ultimately, though we deal with all these single issues as well as we can, the real issue is, where's this coming from and how does that change? Everything has names on it that are going to be misleading. And it seems like language is one of the biggest weapons against people, right? United Nations sounds wonderful.
Right, and rights of the child, that's beautiful.
No more poverty, no more unhappiness. Right. Everything's going to be perfect. It's pretty much like a utopia. Right. Right. So I think it's just like all of you have been talking about, it's elements of individuals becoming conscious again. And I think if that really picks up speed, it's much more powerful than the repression efforts. So in the meantime, I think if people can go and look at all of your sites and resources, and Ryan, you didn't mention where anybody could look at what you're doing, I don't think. So if somebody's interested in home remediation of the type that you do, and they want to talk to you about it, or do you do consultations for people that are too far away and you don't go to their state?
I do. I just did 2 this morning. Yep.
So how do they find out about that?
I'm kind of new to the social media. My wife says that I'm social media handicapped.
You're coming along, Brian.
What's that?
You're coming along. I've seen it.
I'm working on it. EMFharmony.com is my website.
Okay.
It's definitely a source where all of my contact information is there, what I do, and when people reach out to me via email, I usually respond rather quickly.
Okay, that would be great, especially
when I say rather quickly, I'm saying maybe about within 24 hours.
Right, and you're available for Skype consultations from anywhere in the world, right?
Yep, I've done them all over.
Okay.
Africa, California, Georgia.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, and Cathy, what are the things that you're, besides working with Health Freedom Idaho, I know which takes a lot of attention, but you're doing a lot of private work too, right? What is that right now? What are you doing?
I work with private clients on holistic nutrition, and so that I follow a functional medicine approach with that.
Okay.
So it's much broader than nutrition, but when people are when the traditional medical system has failed them, I can be a good resource for people when they're just trying to get a handle on their health issues and what the root cause is. I'm definitely always looking at what the root cause of the problem is to then affect change.
Okay.
And then the building biology side, I do both air quality testing. So we mostly think of mold and chemical off-gassing VOCs with that, and then the EMF mitigation as well.
Okay. And for that, you've got to be there physically, right? You can't do a remote consultation on that.
For the air quality testing, I have to be there physically. For the EMF mitigation, that can be done remotely. The client's just going to they're going to need to get their own layman's meter for that. And then
they're going to have to get a meter and give you the data they collect, right?
Right. And we can do that via Skype.
Okay.
I mean, I can walk them through that via Skype. I mean, it's going to be, preferable if that can be a landline so we can mitigate that radio frequency. But we just walk it, they go through their house just like we would in person. So
okay. Have you found with the nutritional consulting that if you can get somebody's nutritional status improved, that their susceptibility to damage or symptoms from the Wi-Fi changes?
100%, yes. And you have to have a solid foundation in order to handle any insult.
Right.
So, and I find with a lot of my most sensitive clients, there's often an underlying issue, and that could be, amalgam fillings. So they've got mercury toxicity from dental fillings. That could be an infection like a parasite or bacterial overgrowth or an autoimmune issue. So when we help to really strengthen their body and strengthen the immune system, then there can be more tolerance to the EMFs coming in.
Okay, neat. And how do they get in touch with you or find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so my website is Whole Home and Body Health, WHOLE, Whole Home and Body Health, and my email's right on there, and anybody can contact me anytime. Okay,
neat. Okay, Misty, so Health Freedom Idaho, what are just a quick overview of the main focuses that the group has right now, what you're trying to do and how people can keep up with that?
We have healthfreedomidaho.org. It's the #1 health freedom site in the U.S. We have a lot of traffic on that site. And of course, we're on Facebook and all of those things. I don't know how much longer Facebook will allow us to be on Facebook. So
yeah.
I try to send people to the website because then you can sign up for newsletters. And that way you don't lose contact with us no matter what goes on with social media. And
yeah,
also,
they haven't quite gotten to blocking websites yet.
Right, not yet. And you can interact on our website. We wanted it to somewhat replace Facebook, should it not allow us to be on there. And people can interact. They can post their own things. They can comment to what's been posted and make it interactive. So I'm hoping to move, health freedom lovers to the site and know that it's there. As far as topics, we are all about parental rights and making decisions for your children regarding vaccinations, or even, some states have allowed forced chemotherapy on kids.
Yeah, incredible. And if you disagree, they send CPS, I guess. Right?
Exactly. And that's kind of my passion is educating parents about what to do if CPS should show up at your door. And then also clean air, clean water, clean food. You know, we really advocate for the local farmers and the local farmers markets, because, and we try to educate what's going on in some of these big farms, what's going on, how they're treating animals, and how they're treating that animal is going to impact your health. You know, when you eat something from that animal.
That's right.
So it's just getting people to think, and it just seems crazy to me that there has to be a nonprofit for a group of people that want clean air, clean water, clean food. It just seems like common sense, but it's just being bombarded on every level. Yeah.
It's interesting that one of the main complaints about the people who want to take away all those rights is that you're hearing just all this misinformation from people who are doing these freedom organizations and everything, and exposing about chemical farming and vaccines and drug medicine and EMFs and all these things. That I watched the mayor of New York City give an explanation of why he had to force not only kids but adults now to get vaccinated if they didn't want $1,000 fines per violation and prison. It was just for their own good, and it's to save them from misinformation. And they had two medical doctors there too saying, basically all the kind of stuff that we talk about is just misinformation, and it needs to all be controlled.
Well, and we've faced that here at the Idaho legislature. They mandated meningitis for 12th graders, the meningitis vaccine.
Wow.
For 12th graders, and parents were saying, you know, no. And here's going to be the problem, is that the exemption is for school-age children, and so if a child is 18, 19, you know, and they're in 12th grade, how's that exemption going to work?
That's an adult requirement mandate, right?
Exactly. So if it's not, the exemption's for the child. So I'm not sure how that's going to shake out. But they didn't listen to the parents. The parents were saying, here's a vaccine injury, here's what's happened. It's not even the right strain meningitis vaccine for the meningitis that the kids are getting in college. And at the end of the day,
that's aside from the fact that it probably doesn't work anyway.
Right. It's not, exactly.
And the package insert, if you can get it on those vaccines, says that they can kill you on almost every single one.
Right.
So I would think if they could bring that up and say maybe the right not to be killed could be a civil right, or something like that.
But then they say exactly what you said is that the doctor says no, that's perfectly fine, perfectly safe. So then all of a sudden, all the parents that have testified are automatically neutralized. They don't count.
They did that in California because they had a procession of people going through Sacramento at the committee meeting right before SB 277, and they were all, first of all, they came with all these explanations and good stories, and the lady in charge of the committee meeting said, there's too many of you, just say your name and go home. And that's what they did, and then they ignored it anyway.
They did.
So
say, Ryan.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan, I interrupted you.
Oh, I was just agreeing with y'all.
Yeah, you were there at that time, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I watched it online. That was my big aha moment. All these parents were lining up saying, please don't pass this bill. I'm so-and-so, I'm a principal, please don't pass this bill. I'm so-and-so, I'm an attorney, please don't pass this bill. All these educated people, and they still passed.
And the attitude of the people running the meeting was that they were just bored with it. Yeah. You know, if you conspiracy theorists want to talk.
They literally looked bored.
They were bored, and I've seen the same thing at my own city council meetings. They give you 3 minutes. They don't have to answer, so they don't have to listen, so they don't have to know what you said. They only have to watch the clock, and they've got that automated too, so they don't have to do that. And they're texting on the phones and all this stuff during it. I think it's just kind of significant about the whole situation. But I'm not saying that to be pessimistic. It's just this is the reality that we're starting with. We know the direction they're going in, so we have to be
Well, you know, all of these, there's a lot of health freedom groups, whether it was the vaccine groups or health freedom groups, that all popped up around 2016. And that wasn't orchestrated by me or anybody else on the earth. Yeah. It's just, it really is a movement where people are waking up and people are realizing they have to do something to take control of their own environment. And they're doing it. So I just can't believe that hope is lost.
No, I don't think so.
When there's so many groups being moved at the same time to form and do exactly what we're doing here in Idaho.
Yeah. It's just that you started out early in the show saying about cause and effect, and that the doctors that you were seeing when you were really sick said, well, don't worry, there's no cause. That's, you know, it doesn't matter anyway. And the whole issue in a way is everything here is cause and effect. And so you have a choice. You can either find the time and take the trouble to educate yourself, or get the surprise effects. And it's a lot better experience to do the work and study. Get your education. It's actually interesting. So, okay, well, thanks, you guys. It went by in 5 minutes, as I was concerned that it might, and hope we can do more later. And I want to stay in touch with all of what you're all doing and see if we can help at a later stage too. So, hold on, we'll say goodbye in the break. That was Miste from Health Freedom Idaho, and Cathy and Ryan and Christie, and I thought everybody was really great, doing important work. And I encourage you guys to stay in touch with what they're doing, mainly through Health Freedom Idaho and through all the other individual contact points that were given in the show. You guys can go back to and communicate with them if you want, and get the individual services that Ryan and Cathy have. And with Christie, I was sorry she had to go early, but I think it would be good to hear more about how she actually got the people in her community to stop the sighting of the cell tower. And I think Doug would agree that we should have an extra individual program with her, so that people who want to do that can have inspiration and technical tools, and maybe get her connected with some of the specific people we've had from the California Bay Area around San Francisco who are having success in doing the same thing. But in the meantime, the main theme that I got from all of it, well, several of them really, is, you know, you've got the choice all the time. Go with 100% convenience and don't think about anything that's difficult or, you know, bothersome and maybe scary to some people and things like that. Or just stay relaxed and focused and find out. Because if you rely on the system to educate you, or even to educate your kids, there's going to be some really big areas that are left out, and there's going to be some other things, major things that are taught to us and our kids that are completely opposite to what's true. And so if you try both ways, and I've tried both ways in my life, I tried ignoring things for a long time, and it really didn't have good results. You might be able to relate to that. And I've tried the way of saying, okay, here we are in the physical world. This is what's going on right now. This is what world events are happening, and the kind of people, most of the kind of people that are in governments and corporation power positions, they don't really have our best interests in mind all the time, to put it very mildly. So the choice we have to make is start taking care of yourself, start getting educated by yourself, you know, do your own learning. You're really capable of it. You're capable of more real science than almost any of the big corporations are doing. Real science means observe what's going on inside you and around you. Notice patterns, see what they teach you, make hypotheses. That means saying, well, maybe this is happening because of this over here, and then check it out. And if you're willing to follow those steps with things you want to learn in your life, you're doing real science, not the kind that's settled and they don't want to hear anything about what you think or what anybody else thinks after that. The settled kind is propaganda, and it has nothing to do with real science at all. It's used as an excuse to force people to do things like, we talked a lot about the FCC in America, the Federal Communications Commission, and this, I'm sure this has applications and similarities to wherever you live in other countries, that they just pass a law, and the law says you have to submit yourself to something that damages or kills you or your kids or your pets or your surroundings or all the animals and the insects in nature, or starts killing trees, as Mark Steele pointed out on his latest video posted on lostartsradio.com. There's a lot wrong with that picture. You know, America is not the government. It's the people in the land and the real America that's there, and it's the same in any country in the world. That country is not the government. The government was put in or allowed to exist because the people think it's useful for something, maybe protecting the borders, which is a really major one, from invasion of any kind, like we have going on all over the place now. No matter what it can be called a caravan or whatever, it's still an invasion. Government's job is to protect against that, but the government's job is not to control your life and destroy your freedoms and your health and your life. That's not really legitimate. And what was great about the founding of the American government, at least in theory, which they haven't totally lived up to yet, but the theory still remains, is that your rights, no matter where in the world or anywhere else you live in, you have the same rights, and you're born with them. They come from God. They're in nature. They're not coming from the UN or your country's government or your city hall or anything. Those are your servants. And it doesn't mean that you use them to do harm. You're not legitimately allowed to do that. But they're your servants to protect your freedoms and your individual rights. And that's true everywhere in the world, whether the government realizes it or not, whether the people realize it or not. So if it's not realized by the government where you are, like it isn't in America, by most of the people in our power positions, then the only ones left to wake up and put in a better situation is the individual people, which is not everybody else. It means you, because everyone's got to take that step and make the decision on their own, make that change, they say. And if we keep focused on trying to get other people to change to do it, it's counterproductive, and it drags us down into a fighting mentality instead of saying, wait a minute, I have total jurisdiction over myself, and maybe I should start change now and do an assessment of where we are, what we're doing in our everyday life, what we're doing in our relationships to everybody else in our life, what we're doing in taking care of kids, where you're sending them off to school. If they're going to school, maybe we should actually become aware of what's happening to them there, because it's our responsibility. Teachers could take advantage of us abdicating the responsibility, but it's us that has the responsibility. And what are you eating? Are you eating junk food and giving your body fuel that's like putting sawdust or worse in a car and expecting it to be healthy, and then just waiting for the days to count by until the doctor diagnoses you with some unexplained disease? That's not taking responsibility. So I think that the theme of the whole show is to do that. And I mean, you have your choice. It's totally free choice. It's like we said, if you want to take drugs or smoke things, or, you know, drink alcohol, which is a cell killer, and I don't care how much fun it is, it's really not worth it. If you want to be mean to other people, not knowing it's going to come back to you, that's your freedom to try it and see what happens. But you also have an opportunity to not do that. And it starts with assessing what you're doing in your life right now, not what everybody else is doing. You first. And then if you're brave enough to do that, everything else changes for the better if you follow through with what you see needs to be better. So anyway, I think that's what we talked about, whether it's about 5G or cell towers or EMF protection or vaccines or you know, chemotherapy or whatever we're talking about. It's the same message. Don't wait for somebody else to fix it. You know, fix yourself. And since you're a microcosm of the rest, it starts to give you opportunities to make change in the whole world by ways that you never thought were possible. If you want more group support on that or people who are actually already doing it, check out planetaryhealingclub.com. It'd be nice to see you there. It's live. I'm there live every Saturday night. And everybody who can't come on that time gets access to all the archives back to the beginning. And it's all about what we just talked about, really revolutionizing your own life. And be nice to see you there. Otherwise, watch the free videos. I'm going to try to get another one out in the next few days. All the major platforms, YouTube, Facebook, all the rest, until we get banned, which we probably will. I'm trying to not have that happen right away because those platforms are useful. But if and when it does, or even before, check out brighteon.com. That's brighteon.com, started by our friend Mike, and who's also been banned off everything. It's a non-censoring platform. They need support. So if you want to watch a video, try to watch it there as much as you can. Stay up with everything we're doing at lostartsradio.com, our main website. If you want to keep us on the air and help our work and move us toward the school project that we have in mind, donate at lostartsradio.com. And otherwise, just stay in touch. We'd always like to have your feedback on shows, what you think. Richard at lostartsradio.com. They all get read. And we appreciate you guys making the show possible. Thank you. And thanks for sharing the time with us. And we'll be back and see you next time.